Oh, very nice. Someone's congratulating us. Sharad, thank you. So again, yes, Sarah and I, Sarah, who we're honored to have as a guest today, um, to kind of talk about, I think, a really important concept, which is um, vulnerability through leadership. Sarah is a licensed therapist here in Chicago. She runs her own practice. Um, she I think has a pretty unique perspective in that she sees a lot of clients who are either former athletes, they're executives at very successful businesses, either based here in Chicago or around the U.S. And so she gets to see she has a lot of reps working with different leaders, different leadership styles, and we're in quite a unique situation, right? And I think one of the one of the questions I know a lot of our startups have, a lot of founders have, is if you haven't been through a specific downturn before and you haven't faced a real crisis as a leader, is like how do you navigate this time, right? It can just be, it can be something that is where you feel completely unqualified for, and you really don't have a compass or a roadmap of how to proceed in this territory. So wanted to get an expert's perspective. So again, Sarah is the owner of Center here in Chicago. It's a behavioral medicine practice here in the center of Chicago. She also has a yoga studio called Room to Breathe attached to Center. So she integrates yoga into her work, and she'll tell you a little bit more about it. But Sarah, we're excited to have you, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, I was
You had to
here.
travel very far.
I hope you all can hear me well. There's a chat box, so let me know. I know I'm sometimes mumbling things. And this is Dante. I'm not just rubbing my leg. There's a dog down here who joins me in therapy. So, yeah, I am the director of a psychotherapy practice based in Chicago. Like he said, we have 10 therapists on staff, and everybody kind of has their different niche, works with different populations. I started and went to school for sports psychology, so I always had just an interest and curiosity on how to make the performance world better. But what ends up is I work with a lot of leaders. I guess organically become a leader by having a practice. And right now in this pandemic, it's certainly difficult to manage everybody's anxiety, let alone my own. With all the uncertainty, what's going to happen. We are technically a startup. Personally, Room to Breathe obviously is a yoga studio. So yoga teachers, they teach one class. It's not the most lucrative business, and making sure we take care of and make sure that our yoga teachers are okay and able to live the lives they live and continue with their training, but take care of themselves, most importantly, is difficult when finances are crunched and all of a sudden people are losing their jobs. And it sometimes makes sense to say, I can't pay my copay or I can't pay for a yoga class. I lost my job. So on that front, it's really difficult to remind people that their mental health is their foundation. Your brain is your most important organ. It helps all the other organs run. So having that conversation with every human, even therapists, is difficult to remind them that they have to keep taking care of themselves in order to meet the demands of the people who follow them, or the people that they meet with, or the people that they hold space with. So I think the most important part of this whole talk and understanding of the word vulnerability is just being a human and sharing your human experience and being able to take care of yourself as a human before you show up for all the other humans that look to you to say, hey, what do we do here? But most importantly, look to you to recognize that they need the connection, they need the empathy, they just need the validation and the understanding that this is hard and we have no idea what's going to happen, but we can stay strong and we can be present together. So vulnerability is kind of the both and of I'm a human, I'm emotional, but I can be present and I can see your emotions and we can hold space and make sure we're taking care of ourselves and referring to those proper resources.
So we had a conversation last night. I guess you'd call it somewhat of a prep conversation, and I didn't want to be caught off guard. I didn't want to get therapized personally, so we had to cover some boundaries and some ground rules. And by the way, I don't, just in case anyone watching this video has never met me, I realized I didn't introduce myself. My name is Nick. I'm with Shadow Ventures. I kind of work at the fun side of things here at Shadow, and just wanted to offer a hello. Thank you for attending. But anyway, we were kind of going back and forth with, like, I wanted to understand, like, how does Sara view vulnerability in the sense of, like, what is it, right? I think it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And I think in reality, I know a lot of people that I've met, like, have a question of, like, what does it look like? Like, concretely, like, what is being a vulnerable leader look like? Like, where do we, like, what are examples of it? Like, how do I have a picture of truly what it is so I can go out and, like, actually try to practice this in real life?
And I think being vulnerable goes with being other things, right? Being strong, being brave, all those things. I mean, you can read Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, and learn a lot about it. But being vulnerable is showing that you have the ability to feel, the ability to be scared, overwhelmed, confused, all those emotions. It also goes hand in hand with emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, right? So a lot of people now have kids out there and preschools and kindergarten, and the grade school curriculum is now starting to move towards social emotional learning. And that is the ability to say, hey, I feel these things, and knowing that it's not wrong, knowing that it's okay. And it's actually really important to be able to name our emotions so that we know what to do, how to feel, where to go from there, versus shoving our emotions down, not being vulnerable, trying to be just strong, putting up a wall and saying, let's just push through this and figure this out and work as hard as we can, ignore our emotions. And that's when, physical ailments come through, irritability comes through, yelling at people, getting in little fights, getting frustrated, breaking things on accident. A lot of those things, losing sleep, high blood pressure, that's where our entire system kind of goes berserk, because we haven't had the ability to sit down and say, I feel X. So vulnerability is just showing up in your emotional body and saying, yes, these are the things I feel. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to have fear. I mean, fear is what guides us to having motivation, right? If you're afraid of something and I recognize it and I name it, I have a more objective path to go forward on to take that risk.
So how would you suggest you balance? Because there's a balance, right? There is a balance of like oversharing and being too vulnerable, and also showing up as strong and trustworthy and someone who's, like, got the situation under control, which is, like, obviously, which is what you want to come across as a leader. Like, I'm not invincible, but I know what I'm doing and you should trust in me, right? Like, how do you think about balancing those two things and vulnerability through that lens?
Well, I think the ability to be vulnerable offers the ability to be empathic, right? So it offers you the ability to understand and have that emotional intelligence of what's going on with your people and not overlooking their emotional reaction or response to things, but also showing them that it's okay to have an emotional reaction and response that will help us move forward, right? So it's both of, like you said, like, we don't want to overshare, but I don't know when the bills are coming in. I'm very nervous and scared, but I'm going to keep doing my best because of that fear to make sure that we can cover our payroll expenses, do all of these things, but I also don't know, right? So being honest rather than, over giving or over, lying in a way, trying to hide things.
Protecting people.
Yeah, protecting people, but not protecting people, because you don't protect people when you don't tell them the truth, right? It's more scary if in the end what you said isn't what's happening. So if you say I don't know, and you genuinely can address the I don't know is a scary thing to tell the people who are following you, and you understand that and you recognize that, and you're going to continue to work in this capacity and also show up as a human and be I guess lenient, recognizing this is a pandemic and we're all reacting in different ways.
Yeah. So I thought one of the like definitely one of the things I wanted to touch on was like work-life balance in this time. And I think probably natural instinct for most founders and probably most leaders is to run like full steam ahead and basically just overwork to try to get through this tough period. So whether it's like your business is thriving because you have a lot of opportunity and potential sales to make, because you are serving your clients and the pandemic has opened up opportunities for you to serve people at greater scale, or whether it's like, shit, the pandemic just closed my business down, I have to figure something out. I think those are both extremes that people are trying to deal with. And in both cases, and even in the middle ground, it probably leads to overwork for a certain type of person. I personally probably fall in that category. And I think a lot of people probably do as well. So I'm curious, like, what are best practices for, leaders who like to lead by example, and leaders who want to convey like, hey, we need to, this is a time where we either have to like grind and make something of nothing, or there's an opportunity here and we need to like get to the market in a quick way with a lot of speed, because the window is small. And with all of that said, there's a global pandemic going on in the background. How do you suggest you rationalize that?
Well, I guess I kind of jumped onto your lead by example, and I think the most important thing for everybody to do right now, and I know I'm biased, but is to take care of our mental and emotional health. And you can lead by example by taking care of your mental and emotional health. But I think the term work-life balance is so subjective to each individual. Just like exercise is so subjective to each individual, we know our limits if we are more connected with our bodies. Therefore, we will know our work limits if we're connected with our bodies. But we also have to understand that there are things happening right now, and on a subconscious level, we're responding to them because life is different and life is weird. So grinding it out is going to look very different in a pandemic than it does not in a pandemic. But showing up as a leader is first and foremost just recognizing and taking care of my mental and emotional health, right?
Yeah.
And asking my employees to do so, and having real honest sit down conversations that might be difficult, of like, hey, what's your gauge right now? Like, where do you land on the spectrum of like, you want to work a lot to like, you need a little bit more time to back up and take care of yourself. And having like those litmus tests are important outside of a pandemic, but they're really important right now. And giving them options of, working different hours because they're working from home, making sure they're taking some time in their day to take care of themselves, whatever that is. That doesn't have to be anything crazy. But in terms of grinding it out in the pandemic, yes, that's a coping mechanism. Sometimes it's not great. So it's always are you checking in with how that feels? Like, how'd you sleep that night? How was your exercise the next day? Did you drink enough water? Are you eating enough meals? Like, check in on your basic needs.
Yeah.
That's obviously every adult's responsibility, but it's important for adults to check in on adults. It's great that there's now 1099 health insurance, so that's a really great thing, and being sure that your contractors, your employees, whatever they are, have that access to at least find a therapist, find resources. Having a community board of, online groups, Calm app, Headspace app, like at least giving resources so people have something to grasp at.
Yeah. So, if you follow a lot of the kind of the well-known entrepreneurs out there, the Gary V's of the world, if you will, there's a lot of, I guess it's called like hustle porn, hustle culture. And it's more, the messaging you're hearing right now, if you're in that world, is, you have all the time in the world. Like everything you needed to go start that side hustle, everything you needed to go grow your revenue, everything you needed to, go learn a new language. It's the time's there. What are you doing? What do you like? Why haven't you done it yet? Why can't you speak Chinese? But that's like a real message that a lot of us are hearing. But again, like tens of thousands of people are dying in the background. Hundreds of thousands of people are getting sick, including our friends and family. Yeah, exactly. People in your circle who are sick, and it's just like this weird thing where, like, yes, the former thing is true. It's like I have technically more time because I'm not commuting, or I'm not, running around from meeting to meeting, or maybe I'm a little bit slower at work, whatever it might be. But it's there's a lot more going on than just like, hey, I have more time. Like, speak to that.
Well, one, Gary Vee's an outlier, just like Beyonce. So it would be great if we could all have that. But that's very subjective, right? I don't think we necessarily have more time. The days are still the length they were before a pandemic. And we need to move slower because there's so much coming in that we have to process it and recognize what's mine to worry about, what can I actually take control of, and what can I journal about, what can I move about, what can I reflect on that's hard for me to process right now. Mm-hmm. I don't think that anybody should be trying to learn a language right now unless that's something that soothes them.
Yeah.
If learning is a soothing activity for you, then by all means go learn something.
Yeah.
If working is soothing and it feels good, go do it. But if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. I think it's that simple. And I think if it's something people need to do, like it is their work, it's just giving them more tools, more time, and just more empathy to help them complete that work. Mm-hmm. And just like really slow down on what the tasks are, right? There are simple tasks to get things done. Like how many books out there exist to say like, we can do less, we can do more in less time.
Yeah.
We don't have to push ourselves. We don't have to grind the 50-hour work week. It's actually not that productive. No human has the capacity to do that, right? Like when I work with anybody under the age of 13, they don't have the ability to sit for 45 minutes, and mm-hmm. I get that. Mm-hmm. Even adults don't have the ability to sit for longer than 1 to 2 hours.
Right,
so
right.
There's no need to shove more into the time we have. There's more importance on recognizing like we're spending more time thinking about what's going to happen. We're spending more time connecting with family members, checking in with people, buying groceries, figuring out how we leave our house. Like we need to give time to things that actually deserve our attention. And sit down and reflect on what that is. Like what are our priorities? What's in our control? How are we communicating that with our team?
Yeah.
And how are they taking that sort of check-in for themselves?
Yeah. So I think it's probably worth kind of chatting about just the fact that there's probably, regardless of where you sit, if you're a founder, if you're a CEO, if you're a leader, probably tough conversations you're having to have, whether it's letting people go or whether it's like, hey, I can't, your salary needs to be reduced. Hey, we need to furlough you, and we'd love to have you come back to work in 2 months, but for the foreseeable future, like I can't make payroll. Other conversations are, you're still on board, but I don't, yeah, I mean, I don't know where the business is going. Like, this is an unpredictable time, and I don't have the answers, right? And I think because anyone who's working for you wants you to give them some sort of indication that everything's going to be okay. And really, the reality is no one knows. So I guess, like, how do you think about approaching having those hard conversations? Like, we were talking a little bit about this from a vulnerability lens, but like, if you were to sit down and think through, like, logically, step by step of like, how do I like, what are the pieces that I need to really emphasize when I have these conversations? How do I show up for them in a way that is human, and in a way that shows that I care and have empathy? And because we all do, I think sometimes some of us struggle to share the true emotions behind what we're saying. So how do you recommend doing that?
Just like you said it. Just being honest, this is a hard conversation. I mean, I think even before, like, it's hard. Every business is in a hard position. I think as leaders, it's also okay to ask your contractors, your employees, to show up and give you feedback. Like, other people have ideas, and like we were saying before, we all handle stress differently. So there are people who are spinning their wheels and want to give more and want to figure out how. So like, brainstorming sessions could be huge right now. It is the spring. Like, we are all kind of churning in that sort of way with renewal. So I don't think there's anything wrong with showing up in that way of like, these are my decisions and this is why I'm making my decision, and just being upfront with it. Like, there's no money you can't pay. There's really no other way around that. But if it's I don't know what's going to happen, but we're still making some money, and like, for now things are going okay, ask people if they're open to planning with you, or talk through like some of the things that you think would be important, and go follow through on what those paths would be and what those opportunities are for your people.
How do you think about like just timing? Because I think, would you recommend having that difficult conversation now if you don't know the answers? Like, if you don't know the answers, like, even use your business as an example. You don't know how much revenue you're going to collect in April or May, or June or July. But as a business owner, you're trying to think through intelligent decisions so you don't go bankrupt. How do you address, like, how do you think about having those conversations of like, hey, this is our reality. It's a little bit unpredictable, and just like basically just being transparent. Like, does it make sense to be transparent, or is that a bad approach if you don't have all the information that you would need to have a more serious conversation about kind of future plans of an employee?
I think it's important to be transparent of like, these are my focuses for this week, because like right now we have to focus on now. We can't really go forward. We can't say like, this is what's going to happen. It can really only be like, this is what I'm doing now. This is what I'm thinking now. This is what I'm planning for now. I mean, in my business, we have to wait on insurance companies and all of that stuff, and I don't know when that's going to come through, but I can go different directions in terms of fighting for those claims with the Department of Insurance, and checking in with the contacts I do have, but also taking into consideration we're in a pandemic. Health insurance companies are most likely under a lot of pressure right now to do things, but also we're doing work too. So it's figuring out, like, in a way, what's the balance of what's right versus what can I wait for and be patient for? And how can I just let my contractors and my employees know that I'm doing my best to be patient. I'm not going to not pay you, but I am going to figure out how we're going to make money going forward.
Sure. Let's talk about the gas tank analogy.
Okay.
So Sarah had a good example last night, like, I guess moving back to kind of like we're all, we all have different, I guess, energy standards, especially during this time. I think we're all reacting a bit differently. And I just thought she had a good analogy relating to a gas tank. Like we're all filling up every day, and then you don't remember it? Oh, this was like the big eye opener for me. I was like, oh, I get it. Well, you say so. The concept is, let me try to explain it. You go to, each morning we go fill up our tank, and at the end of the day, we eat. We're either completely empty. Maybe some of us are like pretty full because we didn't expend a ton of energy and we have a lot to release. Maybe we have a lot of pent up energy as well. But I think thinking through your energy expenditure during, getting used to a lot of new things, which I think is working from home and like not in kind of like being, like basically sitting a lot, not moving as much. Like I know personally, like I'm not, like I haven't left the house until like 5 p.m. some days, right? And so just like energy expenditure, filling your tank, releasing your energy, thinking through some of that.
I mean, it kind of all goes back to like the litmus test of how you're feeling, knowing your limits. But yeah, I mean, even during the day in the office, you have to check in on like, thanks to Apple Watches, like, have I stood up? But also, like, I guess I kind of want to reference a study, and I don't remember the researcher, but it was on like emotional literacy, and they tested a bunch of teachers grading papers, and they either put them in a bad mood by making them think about something that made them angry, or they put them in a good mood by something that brought them joy. And the teachers who were in a bad mood graded the papers like 1 to 2 grades below the teachers in a good mood.
Of course.
We're not always checking in with how we're feeling. Mood is very dictated by your physical activity and rest and restoration. And so, I mean, it is important, I think, to fill our cup up in the morning, like actively engage in filling up your cup, whether that's going outside or moving your body or doing some sort of pranayama or breath work, to be sure that you're actually addressing your central nervous system that most likely will be set off many times throughout the day during coronavirus. And then doing that repeatedly throughout the day, but also allowing yourself to be more observant of what your cycle is, right? Like the normal cycle is you wake up, you've got a cortisol release, and that slowly dissipates throughout the day. But some people are night owls and their energy is at night. Some people don't love the day right now because they're reading all of this stuff about like, I need to be productive,
Right.
They've lost their jobs, going throughout the daylight is really hard.
Right.
And then once the night comes, everybody can relax because it's the night and I don't have to do anything when it's night out. And I think we just need to be a little more gentle with ourselves, but gentle in a way where we're holding ourselves accountable to check in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The concept of post-traumatic growth. This is another thing we discussed last night. I think it's just a really cool concept. I don't think I had heard of it before. Can you kind of share what that is?
Yeah, props to my supervisor. But post-traumatic growth is that after you've gone through a trauma, there's so much reconstruction, there's so much recovery and healing to be had that you actually go through a lot of growth. You have the choice of growing from what you went through, right? And like we're going through something right now, life will not look the same after this. But we are learning that there are certain things that are important and there are certain things that like really just don't need our time and attention. Relationships that drain us or things that have been difficult because all we do is think and worry about them. Like we actually don't need those things. And post-trauma, going through this pandemic, we actually have the ability to grow and strengthen our relationships, grow and strengthen the things that spark our interests and our curiosities, and we have the ability to expand our technology and all of those things because we're recognizing like there are foundational things we needed here that we were all forced to lean into, like Zoom and all of that at the beginning of this. So there's a huge opportunity for growth after we've gone through trauma, and we have to move slowly through that healing process so we actually see all of our opportunities. Because the other side of it would just, you know, trying to shove it away, not thinking about it, going back to normal, which is really bad for us.
Mm-hmm. What's the so for someone who's thinking about this personally, the idea of post-traumatic growth as a reset, not as much as like, you know, I think like macro speaking, there's going to be a lot of great things that happen from coronavirus. I think we're probably going to be a little bit more focused on the right things, and hopefully we'll create a better world. But from just on a personal level, like we all are learning new things about ourselves, potentially what we actually like to do for work, how we like to spend our time. I mean, it's fascinating. A lot of our obligations have fallen by the wayside, and we're completely able now, especially on the weekends, to do only the things that we want to pursue. So I really think people are going to, there's going to be a lot of questions around like career shifts, and pursuing new paths for your career, because you're going down these rabbit holes of like, oh, I like love this activity. I'm super curious about this. I never had the chance to explore this at a deep level. How do you, so, and then, but you're coming out of a pandemic and like you need to pay your bills. Career shift sounds super daunting. Like just the idea of I wanted to hear your thoughts on the idea of a reset. And I think of that as like something that comes out of post-traumatic growth, and something that could come from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I encourage everybody to be doing a lot of reflection right now on like how everything feels, what we're kind of focusing on, what we find ourselves leaning towards to soothe. Also recognizing that might change when life goes back to something different. But yeah, I mean, we all have a reset after this. The market hopefully will reset in some manner that is, I don't know, feasible for all of us. But I think it is that opportunity that you take or you don't take, because we can just go back to work and figure out how to pay our bills, or if there was something that did spark our fancy, it is setting that sort of accountability to ourselves of like, how am I going to integrate this into a world that might be more demanding after quarantine, because I have to do things on the weekends, or I have people who want to see me in person if they can, right? So the reset is more of a, how do you hold yourself accountable to that reset, but what does that reset feel like and look like to you right now? And then how are you trialing and erroring with it?
I think that so some of the questions around the new normal, and like basically getting back to office culture and work culture after this, like I think that looks pretty uncertain at this point. Like I don't know if any of us really think we're going to be working 5 days a week out of the office after this. What are some good lessons for, like, I guess, human-to-human communication as you make the transition to the virtual world, and some of the suggestions you're giving your clients?
Well, I feel like most of us are doing a good job at connecting and doing more FaceTime. Like before this, FaceTime was something you did with your nieces and nephews and kids and grandchildren. It wasn't necessarily something you did with friends or coworkers, but recognizing that Zoom and FaceTime and Google Hangouts and all of those things exist because we can build those connections. But also like emotional check-ins are a huge thing that I think need to continue. I think there are some good leaders that start their meetings with, how are you feeling? I mean, like Ray Dalio is one of them. Just personal check-in to emotions that you're feeling. They might be paradoxical, but likely are right now. But staying that course as we move forward and recognizing like we're all going through the same thing, there's solidarity here, but it is also important to check in and recognize we're all going through it very differently.
Yeah.
That doesn't end after the pandemic is over. There's going to be fear after all of this. It's not going to be over.
Yeah.
We still need a vaccine, all of those things, but we've gone through this. This is trauma. Trauma doesn't just leave us, it stays with us. It's part of our history, right? And that's kind of like the learn from history thing. And like we're learning here that there's a really important need to check in with people and check in with how they're feeling and how are they taking care of themselves is the most important thing right now. And checking in with your employees and your contractors of like, what are you doing for yourself today?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that should be a huge thing going forward.
Interesting. So kind of the idea of, well, we were speaking a little bit to this before, but I think a concept right now that's crucial with leadership is boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And this is obviously relating to work, but respecting people's boundaries as they make this transition to this very fluid world.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier, like when we do go back to work and we kind of get back to the normalcy of socializing and having normal obligations on the weekends and all that, and the world becomes more demanding, like, you know, how that looks. I actually think, and I've noticed this personally with myself, like it's tougher for me to have boundaries during this period because like literally there's no excuse not to be nearby, right? Not to be nearby the phone, not to be nearby email, not to be nearby Slack.
But
there is an excuse. It's very tough to set that boundary when, especially you are the type of person who overworks.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to disconnect and unplug. And yeah, I mean, like, so what would you like? What are tips for someone who's looking to figure out like how to set boundaries during this actual time right now, where we're all working virtually and are just a click or a phone call away?
Turn your away message off on Slack or on. Have office hours set. Let your people know what your office hours are. And, you know, if you feel the need to go beyond and share why you're not available, then that probably means you're breaking about a boundary that is not useful for you or for the other person. Sit down and reflect on what's actually important to answer to. Like right now, if your mom calls you, you want to pick up, but if KP calls you and it's 8 p.m., you can text him and say, is this important?
Mm-hmm.
But being able to just communicate like what's okay and what's not okay, what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. When you're putting down a boundary, that boundary is for you and the other person. You don't need to explain that to the other person, but they will catch on through their own cognition.
Yeah. So it sounds like just actually putting rules in place, structure and rules.
Yeah, a structure for yourself around when you're working and when you're not working, and when you're disconnecting from work and connecting to the things that you need to fill your cup up.
Right. So I wanted to spend some time thinking through, just talking through performance with you, because so Sara works with a lot of athletes, executive types, and I think one of the questions we all probably have is like, all right, definitely a tough time, but I do have a window of opportunity here, or I need to like make sure my performance is optimized. What are some tips in order for people to potentially get more out of their work during this time, and potentially and blocking out some of the things, or correcting some of the things that might be holding them back?
One, you might not be able to optimize. Just like with the analogy of an athlete, it's really hard to train hard when you're under stress. You can do damage and reverse your training if you do that. So same goes for any entrepreneur, any leader, any business person. it's really difficult to work hard under stress. And stress is sometimes something we don't know what it is until we sit down and really think about it. But like the pandemic is stress right now. But for those who do respond to stress in working and it feels good to work, I think that like my number one activity to do is just sitting down and saying what's in my control and what's not in my control. A lot of people right now have kids and a family at home that they have to give their energy to. Kids are really important right now and they need attention because this is weird and this is part of their development. So that's something. But being able to be in a different world and do something different also gives us the opportunity to make something new or recognize something we didn't recognize before. So any entrepreneur is definitely sitting down and thinking like, how do I make life work for in a pandemic moving forward and still do the things I like to do, what software needs to be developed, what all that stuff, right? So I think it's just recognizing what's in your control, what's not in your control, what do you have, what you don't have, and where are you placing your energy right now? Because you can place it in being productive if you've got a good setup and you don't have kids that need you or, you know, a significant other that needs you or whatever it is. But if that's the case, then you can hunker down and make something great.
Yeah. I think the the example of being there for your significant other, this actually came up with a friend of mine last week who's a founder. And he has a girlfriend. They don't live together. So this is obviously a really tough time for them. He just raised a round of funding and he sees like a really strong window of opportunity now with his business. And he's like, I gotta run after it. And yet his girlfriend is not the founder of a business. She I think probably is, I believe like her work cut her hours down to part-time. So she's really wanting a lot of connection and attention. And he's just like, I don't know what to do. I'm basically quarantining myself in my place. And I have to keep my place. I can't stay with her because I can't work with all this stuff in the background. And like there's too many calls and there's too much to do. Any advice?
Well, couples therapists are just taking virtual sessions.
Yeah.
But in terms of the relationship, like that's I guess a Zoom call, a FaceTime about like what are our priorities individually, independently, and how do we want to support each other in that? Because that's a temporary thing. It could be a temporary long-term thing, but if that's his importance right now, and like that has to do with raising a family someday and building capital, all of those things, like those are important things. And if his girlfriend needs more time that he's not giving, they can compromise and figure that out.
Yeah.
That's a conversation.
Well, cool. Looking at the time, and we want to make sure that we make time for some of your questions. So if anyone watching has any questions, it's very weird that we can't see anyone. Please send them through the Q&A. That'd be awesome. I have more, so I'll continue with Sarah. Mike says, great session. I have to hop off. That's very cool. But yeah, if you have any questions specifically like related to your business or anything. Laurel Durham, no relation. Just kidding. She's my mother. We have to keep showing up with more patience and kindness to ourselves and others while building a resilience muscle we never knew we had. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so just while we're waiting for questions, and feel free to put them in chat or Q&A. What are your, if you had to do a skills sheet for an entrepreneur right now, what would be some of the items you would include there?
Emotional intelligence, cognitive strength in terms of how you think through problems, sense of self, like what's your self-awareness, what are your strengths? What are your areas that you need to work on? And how would you best describe yourself as a leader? Like, how do you work with people? Do you lead by example? Do you like working together? Do you like people going off and doing their own things? Those kinds
Personality type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love the strengths test. But...
Yeah. We just did that internally. So Farzan says, not a question, usually to understand the situation, for better observation and comparison, we ask questions to confirm and to solve problems. In crisis and in unprecedented events, startups don't know what's the right question to ask. Covered a lot of your materials. So I guess, yeah, I mean, how do you make sense of what's the right question to ask in times of not having the experience to know?
I don't think there's a right or wrong question. Questions are questions, right? And there's nothing to solve right now because we don't know a lot of answers. There's just like being present and working through what we can do and what's in our control.
Yeah.
So it's good to ask questions.
Yeah. You want to share if someone is looking for therapy, how to get in touch, and maybe more about your team members and the types of people they work with?
Sure. Well, Room to Breathe is all online on Zoom, and that's just roomtobreathechicago.com. We have some great workshops.
That's the yoga practice.
That's yoga practice. And then for Center, we are center-chicagocbm.com. Our therapists kind of cover the range of humans and human experience, LGBTQ population, eating disorders, trauma, working through relationships and performance, males, emotional intelligence, those types of things. We're all taking new clients. Yeah, so you can email, you can go on our website and submit a form. If you're looking for a therapist elsewhere, Psychology Today is always my first go-to. You can kind of click through like what your insurance is, what types of things you want to work on. And then there are different like Talkspace communities that are happening. ZocDoc sometimes has some therapists on there too.
Cool. So one question that came in, can you share some tips to recognize burnout before it happens, especially given the time we're in, both for ourselves and for our team?
Typically before burnout happens, you are already stretching your time thin and carrying too many things and trying to fill your day. So I would say before burnout happens, enter in some sort of time in your day where you are doing nothing, giving your teammates the ability to do nothing. That's a 30-minute break, an hour lunch, whatever that is. But just kind of recalibrating of what tasks are important right now and what is humanly possible for us to carry. Burnout's going to happen a lot easier right now because we are under stress. So taking what you used to be able to do and kind of dumbing it down to what's actually really important right now, I think is the most important thing, and just checking in with what that means for your teammates.
Yeah, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with burnout is hard.
Yeah.
I think it's probably really important to have it. If you think you might be there, it's probably really important to have the conversation with either your team or your boss. If you think you might be there, you probably already are.
Yeah. We sent out a blog yesterday on self-care and just basic self-care. My number one prescription that I found myself giving last week was go lay on your bed and stare at the ceiling. You can set a timer or not, but put your hand on your belly and breathe for a while. Because we all need to slow down. Our bodies need us to slow down so our brain can slow down.
Cool. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I don't like laying in my bed during the day, but
you can lay on the floor.
Yeah, it's better. All right, cool. Any last questions from anyone? Otherwise, we'll wrap up with Sara. Thank you all so much for attending. This will be, we usually are, we will turn these into an audio podcast.
Introduce Dante.
Hopefully you've seen Sarah has been petting our dog the entire time. This is Dante. He's a therapy dog.
Hey, D.
He's been literally asleep the entire time we've been talking. But anyway, yeah, we'll turn this into an audio version and a podcast, and I think we'll have the recording of the video as well if you want to come back to it. So thanks for attending. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.